Hello, here we got a bit of background on a particular favourite of mine, Thomas Young. So we come across Young in a couple of places in our pre-university physics. So we've got Young's double slits when we're looking at light, and we've got Young's modulus when we're looking at materials. So he's already coming up in two very different areas. But as we'll hear in this, I mean, the guy was just a genius. In fact, he was described as the last man who knew everything. So, I mean, this guy was just different planet with what he could do. So he was born in Somerset in 1773. He was the eldest of 10 children. But of course, you had a lot of big families back then. By the age of 14, it was claimed that he'd already learnt 12 languages. He went on to study medicine at St Bartholomew's Hospital and then at Edinburgh University. So he started off going down a career that isn't physics. And then he inherited the estate of his great uncle, who was quite a well to do chap, and he was then financially independent. So, first of all, he set up his own medical practice in London, but it also gave him the scope to do all manner of other things. And yeah, he certainly did. So, like I say, the double slit experiment, I mean, he's discovered the wave nature of light really on that. So he's challenged that, what at that point would be, I suppose, about a century old view that Newton had proposed, that light was just a particle. The double slit experiment has now thrown things into confusion over all of that. And this is what then paved the way, well, it extended the work of Huygens, who was sort of the next big name in light after Newton. But then it paved the way for all of the discoveries that happened in the 18th and 19th centuries, particularly the 19th century when it came to light. So, I mean, his work on Young's modulus, I mean, that completely revolutionized engineering, because it was a way of describing materials rather than components. So that was something that, well, it just hadn't happened before. So it was a real way of then deciding what materials needed to get used in what situations in engineering. But not for the first time. It wasn't really understood. One of the problems that that Young had was he maybe wasn't the clearest of communicators, which is interesting considering he spoke so many different languages. I mean, there's a bit that I like in his description of Young's modulus, or modulus of elasticity, as it was called when he discovered it. And he wrote this slightly confusing sentence. He sent this off to some politicians and lords and such like. The modulus of elasticity of any substance is a column of the same substance capable of producing a pressure on its base which is to the weight causing a certain degree of compression as the length of the substance is to the diminution of its length. I mean, I can barely even say it, let alone understand it on a first hearing. I mean, it's quite you could say an advanced scientific way of putting it, or a slightly convoluted way of putting it. It's certainly not putting it in the layman's terms for what these lords that he had sent it to wanted to hear in order to understand the value of modulus of elasticity. And he received a fairly fitting reply saying, though science is much respected by their lordships, and your paper is much esteemed, it is too learned. In short, it is not understood. And yeah, that summed up a reasonable amount of his career, maybe. And I think perhaps if he was a better communicator, he'd be even more famous than he is. But aside from those two things, I mean, he also developed theories in color vision. So how do we go about seeing in color? Surface tension, phonetics, language, the tuning of musical instruments, and incredibly, I mean, he was also instrumental to deciphering the Rosetta Stone, which I'm sure a lot of you would have heard of, or if not seen, at the British Museum. That was the key really to cracking hieroglyphics, Egyptian hieroglyphics, because you've got the same bit of text written out in 3 languages, one of which was Egyptian hieroglyphics. And because people knew Greek in particular, then that meant it was a lot easier to then translate and understand what all of these symbols meant. So here, the breadth of what this guy could do and what he studied was just mind-boggling, which is why he picked up that nickname, the last man who knew everything. And the guy was just a complete genius. So yeah, there you go, the astonishing Thomas Young.